Hello and welcome to the Outlaws podcast with Kate and Shayla for professionals unlearning the rules of work and life. Ditch the shoulds and build what fits. Last week, we invited author and coach Alison Shamir in to talk about her book, Conquer Your Imposter. Today, we're going a bit bigger because this episode is all about imposter syndrome itself. What it is, why it shows up in the smartest, most capable people, why it thrives in certain professions, and what it actually takes to change the story we tell ourselves about whether we belong.
Alison talks about the imposter syndrome and the work she now does supporting women to build confidence that's grounded, evidence-based and real. We also dive into the messy stuff, perfectionism, the overlap with ADHD, the self-talk that keeps people stuck. And of course, what you can start to do today to loosen the grip of that feeling of you're not good enough. Alison, thank you so much for joining us again today. It was great to have you on the Outlaw Brewery last week, but we're really excited today to dig in a bit to imposter syndrome and understand it in a bit more detail.
Fantastic. Well, I'm ready for you. So let's.
So tell us, for those who aren't familiar, what is a really great way of just explaining to us what is imposter syndrome?
Imposter syndrome is when you, the individual, doesn't believe that you're as capable, competent, talented, intelligent, qualified as other people perceive you to be, despite, and this is the important point, despite clear evidence of your competence and success. So when you experience imposter syndrome, you, the individual, believe that you're some kind of intellectual fake, phony or fraud in your own life or career, again, despite evidence of competence and success. So you've earned the right to be where you are. You have evidence of the competence. You're successful, but you're ignoring all of that. And instead, you harbor this internal belief of, I'm not enough, I'm not worthy. It's only a matter of time before someone figures out I don't belong here. Who am I to be in this room? And so in my world, we refer to that as essentially a cognitive dissonance. So there is a disconnect between how you perceive yourself based on the reality versus how other people are perceiving you. So they're looking at the reality and they're like, oh, Shayla, okay, they're capable, competent, they're doing this, they've got these credentials. They're looking at you through the reality, through the true perspective. You are not looking at yourself correctly. You are temporarily blocked from seeing your true self, your true competence, and your true success. And that's where this term imposter syndrome comes from, because you feel like an imposter, or a fake or a fraud in your own life. Now you're not, right? It's not true, but it feels very real. The key thing here, and you're probably going to hear me go on about this, is in order to experience imposter syndrome, you must be competent and successful and have evidence of that. So if you have never done the thing that you want to do before and you have no evidence of competence or success in that space, it is not imposter syndrome, it is self-doubt.
Right.
Okay. So you must have evidence of competence and success. And this is what makes it unique. It's very prevalent, but the way it's experienced and sort of why it's experienced makes it unique. And layered, and obviously it's a very, it's a very big topic.
So to what extent do you think it's an individual issue versus cultural issue? Is it workplace, or is it very much something that is part of the individual themselves?
Yes. Well, as I say in the book, your workplace is not the cause of your imposter syndrome, but it is it can be the trigger.
Right.
And so what do I mean by that is that in the book, as you would both know, imposter syndrome stems from an origin story. And I'll explain what that is in a moment. And then how it comes out is through an environmental trigger, which is a meeting, a scenario, a new opportunity, a promotion, returning to work from maternity leave, getting a pay rise. So as you can see, some of those scenarios are actually positive and wonderful and career progression, but they can still trigger imposter syndrome. So back to your question, imposter syndrome stems from a time in our lives, predominantly when we were children or adolescents, not always, but majority of the time. And I'll give you another example in a minute, where there's a time in our past where we were made to feel less than, made to feel inadequate, made to feel inferior, made to feel threatened or less than or worthless or not unworthy, right? Insert all of those words sort of work. And that moment in time in our past has stuck with us. and has planted a little seed that we are, not good enough or not worthy enough, or that people like us don't belong here.
Right.
And that manifests into a story that we tell ourselves. Now, the story is not our fault. Imposter syndrome is not our fault. We never asked for it. We didn't wake up and say, oh, I'm going to feel like an intellectual fraud today, despite evidence of my competence and success. But it stems from a story from the past. That story then plays out in our minds. That story we continue to tell ourselves that story, that we are less than, that we are undeserving, that we don't belong, etc. Then that, back to the other part of your question, is exacerbated by environmental circumstances. So stuff going on at work, relationships that you're in, your boss, career transitions, personal relationships, and so on. So my answer, the macro answer is it's 50-50. But your workplace, and this is a myth I'll bust now, I mean, I say it in the book, your workplace hasn't caused your imposter syndrome. And I know and have interviewed or have coached umpteenth number of people who work in psychologically safe, supportive, incredible, progressive, diverse, you name it, like tick, 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 amazing workplaces, and they experience imposter syndrome. And why? Because it stems from a story that they're carrying that had nothing to do with their workplace. When they walk into the workplace, we're one human, one brain, one heart. This notion of I can separate work from home and this from that. Sure, maybe a little bit, but you're one person.
Right.
One heart, one soul, one mind, one perception of self. Yes, it evolves. And so they carry that story in, and even in a great workplace, they're sitting in meetings, and even if everyone's going, you're amazing, Kate, you're amazing, Shayla, we love you, you're holding a leadership role, you're still sitting there in the quiet, and the story in your head is like, I don't belong here. It's only a matter of time before they figure out they should have given the job to Alison, not me. Right? So the story controls everything with imposter syndrome, and it is critical. And so there's some examples. So it's a mixture of both. But can your workplace exacerbate imposter syndrome? Absolutely. Can it be add like fuel to the fire? Hell yes. Can your boss, your colleague, your this, your that be the ones adding the fuel to the imposter fire? Absolutely. Absolutely. But they are very seldom, if ever, the origin. And that's an important distinction, because we talk a lot about, and I'm on board with this, fixing systematic structures that work against individuals. Of course, I'm on board with that. I spent 16 years working in technology when I was the only woman in the room, the youngest person in the room, the only openly gay person in the room. Like, I know what it's like to be in the minority. I know, and I share some stories in my book. Have you seen? I have been on the end of some terrible stuff in the work. Lots of good as well, don't get me wrong, but some really bad stuff in the workplace perpetuated by in particular two male leaders, right? So I understand, but imposter syndrome requires us to look at ourselves and the stories we tell ourselves and the environment, not one or the other.
I think Kate and I talked on the Outlaw Brewery episode around the relationship between self-worth, self-confidence.
Trilogy of self. Yes, thanks.
Sorry, what was the third one?
Sounds very Lord of the Rings, doesn't it? I know. I am a sci-fi fan, though, so perhaps that's what led me to title the
So sorry, what was the third one? Self-worth, self-confidence,
and self-esteem.
Self-esteem, that right. And I was just interested, in the origin story, and that a lot of it comes from our childhood. People are born, though, obviously with a certain personality, and some kids seem to be quite confident from quite early, and some are not confident, quite shy, kind of introverted. Is there an element of personality that plays into all of that as well, even though there's then maybe later environmental factors that then maybe make it worse or make it better, or is some of that part of it?
Not that I've found, or that we have, other
Okay.
experts have found in terms of our research or body of work. Like, we see that imposter syndrome can impact all personality types and children of all personality types. So, like, not really, to answer your question, in that you could, to your point, a shy child. So I was a very shy child, like very shy, right? Took me a long time which people don't believe when I tell them, but I was a fiercely shy child, right? And that was exacerbated by my parents' horrible divorce when I was young and all sorts of stuff. Versus, children who are very vivacious and outgoing. And we've seen all of the sides of that spectrum still, depending on an experience that's happened to them, end up experiencing imposter syndrome. Because
Yeah.
again, it only takes one comment, one situation, one moment to make that individual feel less than. So, for example, I have a client who was an incredibly confident little girl, and she had a teacher basically say, "You're too confident, like you're too big for your boots."
Right.
Like peg it back. Imagine that coming from a teacher at a critical development age as a really confident and vivacious and outgoing young girl, who was just going about her life. And that comment from that teacher, stayed with her, started to change the whole perception. So she started to dull herself down, scale herself back, not use her voice as much, right? And that started to have strong implications on who she was and how she looked at herself. And she continues to grow up, goes through puberty and those other identifying years. And for young women in particular, because the most critical age for confidence, just talking about the confidence aspect as well in that, for young girls is between the ages of 9 and 14. So
Right.
what also happens, not only the sense of self and self-worth in that example with my client, but in that time, you're also building or boosting confidence. So if you're taking hits in those parts, it has a bit of a domino effect on this entire sense of self.
Yeah.
Um, but, back to trilogy of selves, that was really important for me to share in the book, just because of the evidence from my work and this notion that people conflate those. Now, they're not the only senses of self. We have self-compassion, self-advocacy. I'm sure many other selves that a lot of you have listening to this have heard of, right? So these three are not the only ones, but they are three critical ones with imposter syndrome, and they're different. Because sometimes people speak, and I get it, it's very common, and they just interchange self-esteem, self-confidence. It's like, oh, yeah, it's all the same thing, but they're distinctly different, right? And self-worth is about your perception of yourself, who you are at your core identity, how you like, love, and value yourself. It's got nothing to do with anybody else. Self-worth is completely innately about you to you. No one else. No one else can give you self-worth. People can impact your self-worth, but you're the only one who can control it, right? When it comes to self-esteem, that's when other people and other accolades get involved. It's about external circumstances, awards, praise from other people, things you're doing at work. So we talk about external circumstances coming in. And then confidence is simply your belief in your ability to perform an action, but it is only cemented when you perform that action. Right? It's all about action and doing. Self-esteem is all about third-party validation, reflection, and self-worth is all about you solo.
And we were talking about the interrelationship, I guess, between those few things. And Kate and I were reflecting on the fact that we might be perceived by others, for example, to have good self-confidence. We're both quite happy to do public speaking or, various things that externally we might look as though we've got quite good self-confidence, but actually what we're really feeling is not that. And so we were wondering, I guess, whether or not you can have, good self-confidence, but also have low self-worth, if those, how those two relate to one another. And the second part of that question is, can you have confidence about some things, which I think set off Kate singing last time? Can you have confidence in some things in your
I'm really
life?
working hard not to.
Sing now.
Yes.
Yeah. But not have confidence in others?
Absolutely. And let me start with the latter question. Absolutely. So show me a person who is supremely confident at everything they do. That person doesn't exist,
Right.
right? So just us now chatting on this call, just again, solely staying on confidence for a second. If we all sit here and say, what are you really, what are you confident at? What are you confident? What am I confident at? We're the three of us going to be able to rattle off some things. I'm really confident when I'm doing that. It could be something to do with work. It could be a personal conversation that you're in. It could be when you go to yoga, right? Or whatever. So, but we're all going to come up with something. We know what we're confident at. But none of us are going to sit here and go, I'm just confident at everything.
Yeah, okay.
I'm confident as, So to answer your question now, that is that yes, we are confident in certain areas of our life and less confidence in others. And then sometimes we want to build up the confidence in those areas where experiencing more self-doubt in. And other times we look at them and go, you know what, I'm not really confident in that area, but it's okay because I don't need to do it, or I don't want to do it, or I'm prepared to let it slide, or somebody else can do that now. So yes, it's this 360-degree experience where we want to get to a point where we're confident enough, or very confident in the areas that we want to be, and that we're okay, in the things we're prepared to let go, or just, or that we don't want to apply ourselves on. So absolutely, that's the answer to that.
Mm.
And confidence ebbs and flows. So I say in my work, it's not static, right? Because it could be what's going on in our life. It could be sleep deprivation. Like, I don't know about you, but if I
Oh,
have a few nights of poor sleep, right, even something I'm typically really confident in, I might feel a bit sluggish, or I might start going, I'm not really feeling it today. Like, I'm doubting myself a little bit, because self-doubt by its nature is the opposite of confidence. So if you're not confident, you've got self-doubt, right?
yeah.
And that's just the pendulum we're all on. Confidence goes up, self-doubt goes down, vice versa. And we're all of us on the planet are juggling that pendulum all the time. So
Yeah.
yes, confidence is not static. We grow and evolve. It grows and evolve. We do new things. We get rid of some things. But there's other stuff going on in our life, right? And on the former part of your question is that absolutely you can have high self-confidence and low self-worth.
Yeah.
And that happens a lot for individuals experiencing imposter syndrome, because imposter syndrome is first and foremost about self-worth and identity. Then it's about your actions and your capabilities, which is the confidence piece. Right. But when you're experiencing imposter syndrome, you're doing the actions, you're capable, you're competent, you're just not internalizing it, right? Which is where the disconnect is. So the most confident person in the room, like literally the person who you're looking at, who sounds good, who's presenting good, who's relaxed, could be the person with imposter syndrome, because they're still able to turn up, they're still able to present, they're still able to perform, but on the inside, they are imploding, some
Yeah.
hyperventilating, like the masking, and I'll explain that concept to me, is so strong that what happens is they front up to the room. And I know this from personal experience, because I suffered debilitating imposter syndrome for 10 years, and not one person knew until toward the end when it started getting really bad. That's how well I hid it. And what would happen is I'd walk into the rooms and I would be confident, and people would perceive me as a confident woman. And I was, like, that was true. I was a confident woman, but I was also hiding this reality of how I truly felt on the inside, and that actually I always felt not good enough, and that I had to overcompensate by perfectionism, by being fiercely ambitious all the time, by never taking my foot off the brake, by constantly and relentlessly driving myself to new heights. So again, the confidence was in full motion. It was genuine. It was real. It was happening. I wasn't faking that, because you can't fake confidence. And I know you brought that up in your early, share a bit more on that in this context in a minute. But again, I still had the issues around self-worth. And when people hear self-worth, sometimes, quite frankly, they can just be a little bit frightened of that word. And they say, oh, well, I don't want to talk about my self-worth because I don't feel worthless. And I feel like if I talk about that, it's a bit too deep, or it's a bit too this. And I understand it. It can be at times perhaps a confronting topic, but it doesn't need to be. Essentially, just self-worth is your sense and your perception of yourself, who you are, your identity, how you like or love yourself. And I get it. It can be an uncomfortable conversation and reflection at times, but it's one that's worthwhile having. And a good example of this, and this is something everyone listening to this, if you want, can go away and Google this in your own time, is recently Justin Bieber admitted to experiencing imposter syndrome. And I've thought for years he experiences imposter syndrome, and I've been sort of sleuthing around, looking for some evidence. I listened to interviews. But he came out a couple of months ago and he wrote an Instagram story. And on that Instagram story, it's just textbook imposter syndrome. He actually says, despite all of this, et cetera, I still felt unworthy, like a fraud. He literally textbook writes an Instagram story about imposter syndrome. Now, obviously, he wasn't trying to do that. He was just sharing his experience. But, and you'll be able to Google that and find that there's a picture of the Instagram story, and I've got it on my phone and that sort of thing. And so why am I sharing that? Justin Bieber is a supremely confident individual. He gets on stage in front of 100,000 people. He's worth hundreds of millions of dollars, media interviews, this, that, you name it. Yet still has compromised self-worth, still is experiencing imposter syndrome. So just a quick example, and of course I've got many that aren't celebrities, but high confidence is not the measurement for does this person have or not have imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
And so confidence will not, I always say high confidence will not stop imposter syndrome showing up in those that it does show up in, but it will help you navigate through imposter syndrome faster
Yeah.
because
Okay.
you will apply yourself to the actions and the redirects because you're already a person naturally higher in confidence.
Yeah.
Whereas
Right.
if my
Interesting.
clients come to me, regardless of how they gender identify, if their confidence at that time is also really low, we have to concurrently do work in the beginning as well on elevating the confidence levels in line with my foundational steps around redirecting your story and in my Conquer Your Imposter framework. So depends on the individual,
Mm.
depends on where their confidence levels are right now, and how much we need to focus on that, at the beginning, or whether we can just get to it throughout the process.
Yeah. Can you
Yeah.
explain a little bit more about how self-esteem fits into that as well? Because I think I understand the difference between self-confidence and self-worth, but self-esteem is the third part of the trilogy. How does that sort of interact with both self-worth and
Yeah, good
self-confidence?
question. So self-esteem is built off third-party validation.
Right.
So in order to boost your self-esteem, let's just talk about solo and say, what boosts my self-esteem, like genuine self-esteem? It is the validation or the credentials or the achievements that involve a third party. So what do I mean by that? You win an award, you pass an exam, you launch a podcast and someone listens to it so you feel good. Someone comes along and congratulates you on doing a great role. So you are receiving something, some form of acknowledgement, some form of accreditation, some form of validation, and it is coming from a third party. So it is coming outside of you,
Right.
and it's predominantly coming outside of someone like, your mum or your dad or your partner. It's coming
Mm.
from a third party. So when people say my self-esteem is high or is because they're also getting third party recognition for their work. So for me, I've got to try again, just quick use myself as a guinea pig. I've got strong sense of self-worth, of course, of all the work I've done on myself. I know what I'm supremely confident in and the things I work on, right? I'm like everyone, I'm still juggling self-doubt and fears, etc. But when my self-esteem gets a real boost is when I achieve something third party or someone reads my book and says, Alison, I read your book, I really enjoyed it, or here's the like YouTuber, here's the takeaway, here's what we got out of it. Gives my self-esteem a boost because
Mm.
it's third party, you two, or someone commenting on an object, my book, which is attached to me but is a third party.
Yeah.
And I feel really good and I feel really boosted about it. Or, people sitting at work and their boss goes, great job. And they're like, oh,
Yeah.
so thrilled to hear that,
Yeah. Yeah.
So does that
But
explain
Yeah,
it? Just I want to be
absolutely
clear though.
explains it
Is that
beautifully.
because
Yeah.
I think that's a great question and hopefully that helps listeners as well.
Kate and I were talking offline actually, a little bit earlier about Kate and I both won an award, the same award, and we were talking about how we still feel as though, you know, we shouldn't have got that award or whatever. And so I think though, for me, whilst I agree with you, and we certainly we love hearing from people who are listening to the podcast and say things to us and say that's been useful. Like we love that. Um, but some of those external things, we feel such a intense imposter syndrome around that it's a little bit difficult to believe. So I'm just wondering if that's depends on where you are, I guess, maybe in terms of your imposter syndrome and maybe your recovery from it depends on how much you're able to take some of those external things to heart to help with your self-esteem. And maybe the second part of that question, when you said before, there's external evidence of you being good at something,
Yep.
again, like how do you take that external evidence and what constitutes external evidence? Like, is it just someone saying to you, you've done a really good job? Because often what your internal response to that is, gee, I've managed to get it over them, that they think that I've done a good job. Like how do you really, I guess, use that evidence to get rid of the imposter syndrome?
Well, I'll start with the latter part of your
Mm.
question. You can only take in the external evidence when you have redirected the story that is underpinning your imposter syndrome.
Right. Yeah.
Because for as long as you tell yourself the imposter story, and of course I've put some example, I can give you some more examples now. For as long as that story is ruling your narrative, whether it's once a week, every time you get a promotion or every day, right? That story is ruling the behaviors, the perception of self, and in turn, the results that you end up getting, or how you perceive the results, how you internalize the results.
Yeah,
The
okay.
truth is, if you're experiencing imposter syndrome, you will not truly internalize the evidence of your success.
Yeah. Yeah.
Imposter syndrome is in the
Yeah.
driver's seat. You just won't, because the
Mm.
whole reason you've got imposter syndrome is because it's blocking you from internalizing the evidence.
Yeah,
Mm,
exactly,
right.
yeah.
You
It's a bit
know,
chicken and egg. Do you know what I
yes,
mean? It's a bit chicken and
and
egg.
and what you asked a really good and interesting part there. The other question was like, well, how do we know we're building the evidence bank or something?
You know, lawyers, because lawyers are like, well, what's the evidence? Is it objective evidence?
Yeah,
Like, you know,
so
what's this?
obviously I work a lot in law, but which actually lends itself well to like unpacking imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
So to answer your question, is like the evidence of competence, it starts simply with experience. So I would say to you, Shayla or Kate, have you done this thing before that you're talking about or you want to do? And your answer, you'll be able to answer that really quickly and go, yes, I have, or no, I haven't. Now, if you say, yes, you have, that's some evidence of competence or doing, whether you've done it 1 or 10 times, we're still starting with that's a piece of evidence. Working experience, life experience, doing a thing even once is the start of evidence. If you say to me, no, Ali, I haven't done X thing, I'll go, okay, we have no current evidence on that thing. Have you done something that is similar to that thing? Yes, no, you might go, well, yes, I've kind of done something over here. Right, let's look at that. How often did you do that? How frequently were you exposed? Did it work out? What results did you get? So we start to unpack these scenarios, and in that, we are building an evidence bank, beginning to, or we are beginning to see, actually, there is no evidence of competence or success here yet. That's okay. So how do we build it? Right? Where do we start? And how do we dip our toe in the water? Or depending on your personality, because when we talk about personalities, there are, not drilling down to the 2 types of people, but just in this example, I work with clients because they're all high achieving, high performers, like the 2 of you, right? And they work across law and medicine, and they're heads of this and they're CEOs and that sort of thing. But there's still 2 types of personalities. One is they're prepared to jump in the deep end. So we know the action we need to take. There's a little bit of fear there, but they're like, just let me at it. I'm going to commit to that on Tuesday in the meeting, and I'm in. I'm in. So that, that sink or swim.
Yeah.
They do. They have it in them, and we're able to unlock it. But the other personality type is, I just need a bit more time, Ali. Let's chip away at it. Let's start in next Tuesday's meeting, but then let's do it the Tuesday after, and then the Tuesday after that, and we chip away at it. Both results are fine. Both results or actions are building an evidence bank. But what I ensure I do with my clients and anyone listening to this is, if you're not a sink or swim person, we don't want to turn you into that, because that will terrify the crap out of you and that will work against you in your brain, right? So
Yeah.
I work with clients and say, how are we building this evidence bank? Are we doing the chip away method, which is fine, right? And we've got a plan and, and we're chipping away at the story as well. You're telling yourself, or are we this sink or swim where once we start to chip away at the story, they're like, let me into that room to try this action. Like, I'm sleeves are rolled up, I'm in. So
Yeah.
my job as well on the coaching aspect of my business is to work out, with the clients, which arm of that they are, they want to do. So, and please, Shayla, remind me of the other. I think there's another part of your question there that I haven't answered. I think something you said at the
No,
start.
no. I think I can't remember, to be honest, but I think those answers were really great. And yeah, because that's certainly it for me. Kate, do you think you sink or swim? I mean, sorry. Do you think you sink or swim?
Yeah.
Oh, well, I mean,
Sorry.
well, now you're
Yeah.
getting deep into issues of self-worth here, Shayla, but no,
Well, it can be personality type as well, just quickly.
Yeah.
So, for example, like I was in America last week. I've just come back from a week in Virginia, which was amazing.
Oh, yeah.
I did a big conference with nursing and the faculty of nursing and health at the University of Virginia. And one woman who's a star, and we got on really well. And I won't say who she is to protect her privacy, but she's that sink or swim mentality. So she said to me, she's in control of her imposter syndrome. Right. So she does have a handle on it, barely shows up for her anymore, which is amazing. But she said, Ali, I'm that persona where, and we sort of spoke about this where, she said, when I've then got to do it and I've got to push that button, I know the fear is there, but I'm just, let me at it, open the door. And I said to her, you can handle the sink or swim. And she's like, yes. I just line up the meeting or the conversation, and I'm like, this has got to be it. I'm in there. I've got to give it a try.
Mm.
But and we're talking about that suits her personality. Whereas again, we're talking about other people who you wouldn't put them in that situation because it will cause the anxiety and the cortisol too high. And that would just exacerbate the imposter experience, not reduce it. So
Yeah.
I know I'm sort of going on about this a bit, but for those listening, think about, just be genuine with yourself and go like,
Mm.
what do I think more aligns to my personality? There's no right or wrong, and know that you can be comfortable to sit in that and we
Yeah.
can unpack it in a way that still allows you to be your authentic self. And that's important from a self-worth perspective. Authenticity. Now, authenticity has layers. This is another important point I want to make. Authenticity is not static, right?
Mm.
We all have varying versions of our authentic self.
Mm.
And the way I explain that is we're on this podcast now talking about this great content. We're all being authentic. Okay. We are being our authentic selves now. But if we went and had a glass of wine later and we're chatting about all things life and some other aspects of our personality and the way that we communicate might come out, it doesn't make us less authentic. It's
Mm.
just a part of
Yeah.
who we are. So in my world with my clients, I call that authentic and appropriate. You are being
Right.
authentic, but appropriating it to the situation
Yeah.
you are in. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's
Mm.
actually a key part of high performance. Read the room,
Mm.
Yeah.
commonly referred to as
Right.
read the room, right? And that doesn't mean you have to do cartwheels and bend yourself into everybody else, but you still got to have this perception of,
Mm.
do I feel psychologically safe in this room? Yes, I
Mm.
do. Okay, I can sort of be a bit this way. Actually, no, I don't. There's one person in here who, for X reason, doesn't make me feel safe, so I'm just going to hold back a little bit.
Mm.
That doesn't
Mm.
make you less authentic.
No.
It makes you
Right.
authentic and appropriate. But just chucking that in
I'm just
because
thinking of that Rudyard Kipling line. Do you know that as or was it Desiderata? I can't remember. There's a famous sort of poem. I think it could be from If by Rudyard Kipling. Sort of be yourself without as much as possible without surrender. Seek to
Mm.
get on with people, basically. And I think that's the key thing, isn't it, that you're saying there? It's like, yeah, you need to at a certain point accept the reality of the room or the situation which you're in, but be yourself without surrender. There's that core authentic you that needs to remain the same.
Mm.
Otherwise, you feel like you're just bending and sort of switching to please others.
correct. And then you lose yourself in that mix. I love that. So wherever that quote is from,
I'll,
absolutely.
I'll find it's one of the two, and I'll put
Yeah.
it in the show notes.
Absolutely on point. And as I just wanted to get those different, arms there around authenticity because that's connected to self-worth. And imposter syndrome wants to pull us away from authenticity. Imposter syndrome wants us to wear what's referred to as a mask, this
Right.
metaphorical concept of a mask. And I know, Kate, you brought that up in the earlier chat, and then this notion of what happens if you're a neurodivergent individual and the concept of masking. So to be clear for everyone listening, masking is this concept that is connected to imposter syndrome, but you can mask and not have imposter syndrome. It is not an imposter syndrome specific
Yeah.
thing, right?
Yeah.
It's not
Yeah.
it's not exclusive to imposter syndrome. So just to be clear on that for everyone. But imposter syndrome makes us go, well, I need to be a perfectionist, or I need to communicate like Shayla, not like myself. Like I need to speak like she speaks, and I need to hold myself like she holds herself. And so we morph. Like it's all going on internally, right? Nobody else is seeing this. This is all happening inside our own minds and our perceptions of self. And we're like, I've got to be this way. I've got to do that. I've got to act like that. And it pulls you away from your authentic self, which is why when individuals are starting to overcome their imposter syndrome, they will look back on certain behaviors or scenarios and go, gosh, can't believe I did that in that meeting. Like not in a disastrous way, but they'll be like, can't believe I sort of sat like that or said that or addressed that like that, because that's like not me at all. And that's when we know the sort of imposter lens is coming down and they're like getting that better sense of self, and they're like, I don't know why I did that. Like I didn't need to do that. I just needed to sit here and, address the question and move on. So we get these nice aha or reflection moments when people are like, oh God, I know I've come a long way because, 3 weeks ago I was doing that and now I'm doing this and this is more like me. Right?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
We're starting to chip away and they know who they are and we've reconnected with self and we're not dependent on external validation. The other thing quickly is, if you just indulge me for a second, is imposter syndrome wants to keep us in a cycle of needing third-party validation.
Yeah.
So we're like, I need it. And the irony of that is
Right.
then we get the third-party validation and we ignore it.
Yeah.
anyway. Like we
Or
win these.
discount, or just
Yeah,
sort of discount the
that's right.
third-party validation and go,
So we
"Oh,
want
well,
it, and we
that
get it,
probably
and we
doesn't mean
stay.
much," or yeah.
Yeah, so that's the irony of imposter syndrome. But again, it spins you into these cycles because you're like,
Mm.
I want and need third party validation. It will make me feel better. And then you get it and you're like, oh no, they didn't really mean that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah.
So that's what I'm saying. This is where it starts to play mind games with us because we say we want something and we get it, but we're not internalizing it. And this is why in a lot of imposter syndrome literature, including in my book, we talk about cycles or these patterns, these self-sabotaging patterns you get stuck in, which is prime imposter syndrome. Everybody has a pattern or an imposter cycle. And a lot of the work I do in my coaching as well is mapping out the client's cycle and then honing in on the repetition of that cycle, how frequent or intense it is for them, and of course how we break the cycle, how we
Mm.
lodge and intercept in and change that, which is another data point,
Right, right.
beside potentially the client scale. And we're capturing data here and we're looking at it and we're looking for the patterns. And that's my job, obviously, to help my clients do that. And then we obviously carve the new pathways through.
Fine. So, Alison, for people who are feeling the weight of imposter syndrome, and I suspect there are a number of challenges they have to get over, I'm wondering sort of what the biggest challenge for people trying to get over it might be that you've seen in your work, and sort of the best, or so maybe three things they could do to start working on it.
Yeah. So the most critical thing when it comes to imposter syndrome is to analyze the story that you tell yourself and is to rewrite, or what I call redirect, that story into something I called an evidence-based statement. An evidence-based statement is rewriting the negative story you tell yourself, but anchoring the new statement in evidence of competence and success, but also self-worth. And again, in the examples I share in my book, I give you the framework of how the new statements are anchored both in worth and competence. And this starts to we're telling ourselves this different story because the story underpins everything, which is connected to the science of self-talk and then the repetition of behaviors and the way that they're wired into our brains. And then we need to look at the key self-sabotaging behavior. So it could be perfectionism, could be ruminating, which is chronically overthinking, could be procrastination or avoidance, could be excessively overworking, where you like working till 11 o'clock at night, you're sort of overcompensating and thinking I've got to work like an
Mm.
absolute crazy person here to prove that I'm good enough. So we all have a default self-sabotaging behavior. And after we work on the story, we need to then move to the behavior and go, okay, this behavior is not serving me. It's sabotaging me. So what can I replace it with? And in my book, I give basically all of my key tools. So I speak about excellence over perfection, what that means and how you do it, changing the story, flipping the comparison coin. So I believe there is a positive side of comparison through aspiration. I explain this
Yeah,
extensively. I
yeah.
talk about self-critique versus self-criticism and the importance of self-critique in high performance. And so we look for the immediate action, or what I call a redirect, to change that self-sabotaging behavior. And these are the two most critical points: the story first, then the behavior, because the story drives the behavior. So if somebody comes along and says, well, Ali, I just don't want to work on the story yet. I mean, I know I'm stuck on perfectionist tendencies. Just show me how to fix that. Show you how to fix that. But if you continue to tell yourself that imposter story, you'll end up back in the cycle really
Mm.
quickly. Right?
Yeah.
I want everyone just to think about a moment where you have been made to feel inadequate or less than or worthless, or those really harsh sort of experiences. Like when you take yourself there, the story that's underpinning that, right, is so deep, and it fractures or has you questioning your identity. And when you are questioning yourself and your identity, you are fragile. So if you have ever felt this way in your life, you know that in that moment how fragile you
Yeah.
feel. You
Mm.
feel out of control, you feel upset, and you feel fragile. You do, you can feel it. So the story with imposter syndrome underpins that. So imagine, sure, you can go away and you can work on some behaviors, but that will not help that low sense of self-worth. That will not help that fragility. It will act as a masking component. It will act as a band-aid. If you do not change that story, you will stay in these cycles. And that's not my opinion. That's what
Right.
that's what the evidence, my 12 years of work has shown me. And that's why, and that to finish that story, that's why people continue to get to a level of success. They make more money, they launch the business, they go up the chain in the legal profession, right? They get the success, they get the evidence of competence, but what do they do at night when their colleagues go home and they're alone in their office?
Revisit that origin story.
They sit there and go, I don't deserve this.
Mm.
I don't belong. Tomorrow, when I walk into court, I'm going to look like a fool. I'm going to look humiliated. What comes back? The story.
Mm.
No amount of money, no
Mm.
amount of success can necessarily outrun imposter syndrome, which is why so many celebrities, so many multimillionaires, as
Mm.
well as just successful everyday people still experience it. So work on the story and the techniques, sure, then move to behaviors or do them concurrently, right? I'm not trying to, everyone's got different learning speeds, but the story is critical. And those of us that can control our story, and it doesn't mean again that we feel supremely confident in every room
Mm.
we're in. We just go, oh, I've
Mm.
got no problems or no fears. Of course, they still exist. But when times get tough and when or clients, or I'm sure you guys are in a hard place, when you control that story, you tell yourself it's what holds you up. It's
Yeah.
not your repetition of behaviors, although that's good. It's the story where you go, you know what? This is a tough time. I'm in a pickle here. I'm in a hole, but it's okay. I can figure this out. Or I can call on someone to help me. Or I can chip away at this consistently for the next couple of weeks. But that's how powerful that dialogue is to yourself versus I'm worthless. I'm not enough. I don't deserve to be in this room.
Mm.
You can just clearly see the runways that those stories are taking you down. I've interviewed a lot, more than 1,000 people that don't have imposter syndrome, right? They do not have imposter syndrome. The stories that they tell themselves about worth and identity, about competence and about success are completely different to those
Yeah.
who experience imposter syndrome. I can talk to somebody who's come from childhood trauma, who's come from all of these things that you might say will tick a box to
Mhm.
guaranteeing imposter syndrome. But the stories, the experiences, the way that they've addressed things, the way that they talk to themselves is different, and therefore it hasn't manifested into imposter syndrome.
Mm.
So
Yeah.
if you develop that skill of controlling the narrative you tell yourself, that skill will serve you
Mm.
in a multitude of ways. And you just have to go and talk to those people who don't have imposter syndrome or read the stories. Like Oprah Winfrey is like the poster child for
Yeah. Right.
ticked all of the boxes of should have had imposter
Right.
syndrome per se, has never experienced it. And that is
Oh.
because the way that Oprah spoke to herself
Mm.
and innately the stories that she always told herself that she was destined for greatness, that she could
Yeah.
do, that she she was like, let me at it. You're all
Mm.
telling me you can't. So that's the power of the internal narrative. So
Yeah.
don't look at it as this big scary thing, this shadow of I can never get through this. Start to look at imposter syndrome like a practical barrier or challenge that you want to move through.
Mm.
That starts
Yeah.
to strip away its power. It's not this big scary, I don't
Yeah.
see it. It's just like, this is a barrier. It's in
Mm.
my way. It's a real thing. So now, do I want to lean in and consciously chip away at it or not? And that's completely up to the individual, right? But of course, my recommendation is we lean in and we chip away at it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's incredibly inspiring and a great place to wrap up, to know
Yeah.
that, you can recover from it, because I think when
Yeah.
people are deep in it, it feels very overwhelming. So thank you so much for joining us today and on Outlaw Brary. It's been so great to have a chat to you. I
Mm.
think, we could have chatted for hours, but
Oh, yeah.
I'd recommend that everyone go and get Alison's book. It really does have some great tools in it, and it's really great to hear from you, Alison. I think that's really going to help people.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you so, so much. I think there's so much to think about in what we've just talked about. I know I'm starting to, again, so much. I'm going to reread the book because there's so much wisdom in there, but there's so much practical guidance as well. And I think that's what makes this book so special. So thank you so much for sharing your expertise with us and our listeners, Alison. Yeah, it's very powerful
Thank you.
stuff that you're doing.
Thank you both very much.
Well, thank you to Alison. Wow, that was an amazing episode. Such an honor, actually, to have, the author of the book that we did for last week's Outlaw, Marie, join us to talk more about imposter syndrome, what it is. And ironically, because I've been saying this whole thing has made me feel like Oprah, Alison referenced Oprah as someone who really, given her background, should have had imposter syndrome and didn't. And largely that's attributable to her self-talk, which was always positive, apparently, assuming that that makes sense, right? Because of, what Oprah has done in her life and where she's got to. So, it sort of reinforces that notion that the most powerful thing we can do is rewrite that internal monologue. Your George, my Rhonda need to sort their stuff out. And
Yes.
yeah.
No, I
So
think that was
working on that self-talk, that's a really key issue there that Alison identified. And I think that's an incredibly powerful takeaway.
Yeah, I think that was definitely her main point, was you need to get that origin story under control, and you need to rewrite them with what she calls evidence-based statements. So, and there is more about that in her book, and then she says, to use some of the tools to help you to get there.
It is a really fantastic book. So huge thank you to Alison for joining us today and sharing her wisdom on this really important topic with us and our listeners. Very much appreciated.
Yeah. So let us know what you thought of the episode, Outlaws, and let us know what you think of the book as well. And as always, thanks for joining us and have a great week.
Yeah, thanks everyone and see you next week.
Bye.
Bye.